Well, I saw that removing it had a 1 connected to part of it, so.
Well, one thing I want to mention too is, obviously he's talking about possibly, what if there's this pocket of solvent or whatever, but remember, we went out there, I don't know, maybe last year or so, and did some investigations on groundwater. Is there anything actually coming from the landfill and going into the bay? And that was decided, you actually, Dr. McGowan, you actually had on your presentation. And the results of that was the groundwater was fairly clean. There was one area where we did see, well, we're gonna have to go in there, which is why that's one portion of a hot spot that we're gonna go out there and take care of, because we know that in the groundwater is being impacted there. You take care of that.
Yeah, see, that's the great thing about nature, is if it's isolated and kept alone long enough, the organic constituents, the bacteria and everything are going to degrade everything. The metals will stabilize, equilibrate, stabilize, and everything. I mean, you wait long enough, it's going to be safe completely.
Well, because
Now the question is how long, for everything to go. I mean, the concentrations now, it's like the groundwater samples that we take from any of these areas. You look at the concentrations of contaminants back in the early 90s, and you look at them now. There's a significant reduction has occurred at almost every place across the site. That's, as Melanie was referring to, we've looked at the migration pathways, like going toward the bay and everything. Everything is attenuating a great deal. And by attenuating, we mean it's reducing in concentration. It might be that it's degrading. It's combining with other minerals there and coming out in the soil. Clays are holding it. I mean, anything that holds it back so it does not move with the groundwater. It's significantly better now than it was in the 90s, and definitely is significantly better in the 90s than it was in the 70s, and better then than it was back in the 50s when some of all this started. So,
okay,
I mean, these examples that I stated, you asked, what are these risks? I mean, as I said, like a municipal landfill, some of these things happen. Don't infer what I'm saying, that this is causing a present risk in its current condition, because there are I am not familiar with any risk, and I'm a groundwater specialist and a geochemist, that the groundwater is causing any issues anywhere at any point of exposure or any risk to the bay currently.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I appreciate there's risk to that. I mean, there are a lot of people in this community that aren't here anymore, and they were at risk and they didn't really know it. You know what I mean? And I think whatever risk in taking this out and in trying to do and looking at these other alternatives, I think should be viewed. I'm not trying to be callous about the folks that go in and do the cleanup. I understand that that's a risky thing. I mean, you're sending people in, goodness knows what's going to happen to them. But I think, you got to look at the sort of whole picture thing, throw costs out of the window for a minute, and I was just sort of curious about what this does in terms of the air we breathe, exposure to the neighborhood, drifting, those kinds of things.
okay. I would like folks to be a little bit more cognizant of the time. So we do have 2 more people who want to ask questions, and just need to finish up right now. And again, thank you all for being patient. So,
the cost estimation, I think, must be a pretty elaborate exercise, but I think it would be good for us to just get maybe 2-3 pages of how we end up with 332 and how we end up with 86 and 72. If there is a way in which...
I have 3 pages right here.
Okay. So just to share that with, with Arc Ecology and also with the lab members.
It's in the document, right?
Yeah, it is in the document. I mean, basically, each alternative has a series of, basically spreadsheets, and there are tables. In particular, just bring your attention to table R3, which is in Appendix R of the document. It is a, let's see, is it a 5-page? 3-page spreadsheet table with all the backup, essentially, of how we arrived at our cost estimates for each of the primary components of what we call the capital cost, what it will cost to do the excavation.
I mean, I do want to acknowledge one last word from my side is, I do acknowledge that the Parcel E2 area has reached a sort of a dynamic equilibrium over time, and it seems, it may suggest that maybe let's just leave it alone there. You know, excavating it and moving it somewhere has all these costs associated and the risks of transporting them, etc. But to me, I sort of try to look at it in a very simplistic way, is if you, let's say you stamp on a piece of glass or some thorn, and that is embedded in your foot, and over time you're not getting any pus or anything like that, and it has stabilized, but you normally, you don't want to just leave it there, is my feeling is, you want to just remove it because you don't want anything future. In some ways it's a hard analogy, but I just want to share that. I think that's what, speaking on behalf of some of the community members who are not here, is I think that's the perception is, while it may currently be in a gravitated state of a dynamic equilibrium without contaminating the bay, that that's a preferred alternative.
Okay, very good.